American movies, the tough guardian in The Bodyguard, the dreamer in Field of Dreams, and the brave director who brought Dances with Wolves to life and changed the way Hollywood tells stories forever. He came from Linwood, California, and was the son of a ditch digger and a poor social worker. He didn't get where he is today because he was born rich or famous. He got there because of sheer will, unwavering faith, and a burning belief in the power of human stories. He does more than just act. He builds feelings into things. He found the truth in quiet, made poetry out of loneliness, and created worlds where hope and heartbreak lived together. But behind that calm voice and proud look is a heart that has been through storms. 2 failed marriages, 7 children from 3 different women, and the wreckage of love broken by betrayal, legal wars, and losses that not even glory could cover, get rid of. The applause could never cover up the silence that came next. The light could never warm up a house that was empty. At 70, the storm is back, this time darker, heavy, and closer than ever. Give Kevin Costner a like if his role, smile, or unwavering spirit has ever touched your life. It's a quiet way to remember the man who has suffered in silence and carried his cross through the fire of fame, yet still chooses to shine. As if it were Hollywood's last flame. It breaks my heart to think that the man whose quiet strength would one day keep the world stable started out in darkness and silence. A boy who was easily hurt by fear and had to fight to stay alive long before he ever dared to dream. Kevin Michael Costner came into the world on January 18, 1955, in Linwood, California, a dusty town with lots of houses. William Bill Costner was a ditch digger who worked his way up to become a power line expert, and Sharon Ray was a social worker with kind eyes and tired hands. Their lives were built on the edge of being able to stay alive. Bill's clothes still had the smell of oil and metal on them. The color of the ground he worked was always on his boots. His thick, scarred hands spoke a language of hard work that no one had to understand. Sharon's eyes were always heavy with other people's pain when she got home at night. While cooking dinner on a stove that hissed more than it burned, she still found a way to slowly hum. Their house was not very big, dreams simple. But their steady, unspoken love kept them warm when the cold winters got through the thin walls of their rental homes. Kevin learned early on what it meant to see his father fix broken tools, fences, and even spirits. He also learned what it meant to see his mother handle being tired with grace. Getting by wasn't a word in that little house. It was the air they breathed. There was love, but there was also a silence that never left the family. In 1953, 2 years before Kevin was born, tragedy had already happened to them. Mark Douglas Costner, his middle brother, lived for just 1 day before his heart stopped beating. This was the kind of quiet loss that changes a family without being said out loud. From then on, love in the Costner family turned into something powerful, protective, and sometimes tough. Bill and Sharon's sadness was like a cloud that they couldn't move. Because he no longer trusted the world, his father became stricter to protect his other boys. Even though his mother was kind, she became silent and showed her love with long looks and careful movements. In the kitchen, she would sometimes stand still with her eyes locked on an empty corner when Kevin was little. That look was full of love and something else, a memory of the child she never got to hold. At those times, Bill would be quiet, and his rough hands would grip the table as if he were trying to hold the family together by force. That lack hung in the air like a soft but constant shade. In that sadness that didn't need words, Kevin may have learned for the first time what pain sounds like when it fails to cry. It took Kevin 12 years to pack up his life, which is longer than most people do in their whole lives. They were always moving, that's for sure. Compton, Ventura, Visalia, and Orange County are all looking for work and security, but they never seem to be able to catch either for long. Every move broke my heart a little more. Every year brought new schools, new people, and fresh starts that finished way too quickly. He would remember later that we were always packing up and starting over. I learned to keep my feelings inside. As a child, the sound of tape breaking across cardboard became his background music. He wasn't the ones who were loud or the best at sports. He was the quiet kid in the back of the class who wrote poems instead of answers. Teachers forgot to call on him. One night, Kevin sat in the back seat as another moving truck drove off. He watched the streetlights flash by like they were memories he wasn't allowed to keep. He wasn't sad. He said goodbye in a whisper to a town that had never heard of him. As only childhood can be, it was mean. It taught you how to say goodbye before you learned how to fit in. But through that quiet pain, something strong grew, a faith that he could build something lasting even if no one saw him. By the end of high school, he had changed. Not just in height, but also in heart. He finally got to 6'1", thanks to that rare catch-up growth, but the real growth took place inside. Before, the boy lived in the dark, but now he found his own light. His voice shook with longing in church groups. He wrote songs about the sky and second chances at night. He longed for big, open spaces, stable ground, and stories that would never need to be put away. The rules his father set for him became his guide, and his mother's faith became his base. He would say, "I guess I was getting used to starting over." That line wasn't about moving. It was about everyday life. Each goodbye had made him stronger. He learned to listen more with each pause. He learned early on that life doesn't owe you ease. It only gives you chances to start over. He got the courage to tell stories that would change the world from those chances. Neither because he was born to be great, nor because he was made in the quiet, hidden places where greatness starts. At age 23, you have a new wife, no money, and a heart that won't settle down. How much does a dream cost? The price meant everything to Kevin Costner. He felt safe, sure, and proud, like a young man who didn't want to let down the people he loved. He did what every good son was meant to do in 1978, right after graduating from California State University, Fullerton, with a degree in marketing and finance. He got a steady job. Every morning, he put his shirt on, smiled at everyone, and died inside. The salary was steady, and life was easy to plan for. But he couldn't hear anything inside him. There wasn't a number in his heart. There were stories set in places that no one else could see. In the middle, between the rows of booths and the sound of typewriters, he began to understand that safety was a slow death. Then fate stepped in and put on the face of Richard Burton. After his honeymoon in Mexico, it was just another trip home. When Kevin looked to his right, he saw one of the best actors alive sitting next to him. There was an electric feel in the air between them, like fate had taken a seat. He told Burton a secret that had been bothering him for years, but he did it nervously. He had a strong desire to act, but he was scared to do so. Burton looked into his eyes, which were heavy with 1,000 rolls, and said, "You have green eyes." "My eyes are green. I believe you will be okay." The plane touched down and Burton's car pulled up to the runway. Kevin and his new wife were waiting for a bus. It was quiet outside as Burton leaned out the window and whispered two things that Kevin would remember for the rest of his life. "Have fun." What they said for less than a breath broke something inside him that would never close again. In just a few weeks, he quit his job. No one in the world cheered. It turned away. He took one bag and a used jacket with him and drove a beat-up Datsun toward Los Angeles with just enough money for gas. What happened next wasn't the romantic. A battle that people like to think about. There was hunger, cold, and a quiet sense of need. His mind was on whether he'd ever own his own house as he cleaned boats, drove delivery trucks, and led bus tours of movie stars' homes. The heat in his flat sometimes broke, so he curled up in all of his clothes and told himself, "Just one more day. Do not stop." He could still smell the salt and gasoline. His work-weary hands broke. He wasn't looking for fame anymore. He was trying to stay alive. He never called home during any of it. Pride wouldn't let him. It was hard to tell the days apart because I was so tired and upset. He walked around with a folder of headshots that was getting limp from his sweaty hands and knocked on casting doors that never opened. They would tell you to leave your picture without looking up. He would walk miles just to keep the bus fare. His shoes were getting worn out and he was hungry, so his gut felt like it was in a knot all the time. Joffrey, nights when it rains. He would park his car outside the studio gates and watch the extras come out under the lights. He would sit in the dark and listen to their laughing through the fog. Los Angeles said dreams would come true. It made him quiet instead. But even in the quiet, he became more determined than ever to not give up and go home. Then, one afternoon, an acting friend told him about a small production, a cheap beach movie that needed people to fill the frames. There is no pay or promise, just a chance to work on a real set. Kevin walked in barefoot, with sunburned skin and blonde hair. The boss told them, "We just need someone to do the work." He said yes. He only knew how to do that. He could feel something change when the camera finally turned to him. Nothing but resistance, not hope. The world seemed to disappear for a moment. He promised himself in silence that he would always show up with the lens. That movie, Sizzle Beach, USA, gave him his big break, and it almost broke him. Cheap, weird, and released against his will years later. It seemed like a mean joke. His later words, "I wished I could buy every copy and burn it," proved true. But being made fun of wasn't the worst part. The other half could not be seen. He tried out and then vanished for 6 long years. The dream that had been so bright started to flicker as casting agents looked down and hazy faces and doors shut. He got a part in The Big Chill, but every scene was cut from the final movie. His name had been erased, and he watched the premiere by himself. His trust was weak. He wasn't just poor. He couldn't be seen. He refused to give up, though. He learned how to turn quiet into truth and rejection into strength by going to acting classes at night. In the end, he said, dreams don't open doors. They only make you stronger to keep knocking. And in 1985, Kevin Costner finally got a part in Silverado when the director who had once turned him down, Lawrence Kasdan, called him. Came out into the light. The man from the edge of Hollywood who had been forgotten burned across the screen like he had been waiting his whole life for that one moment. The clapping that came next wasn't a fluke. It was to stay alive. Glory tastes like sweat, doubt, and the sting of being tired when mixed together. The man did not get to Hollywood. He blew up. Before, he drove cars and cleaned boats. Now, he was in the middle of every screen, news story, and dream. The world had no idea that the most quiet person they had once ignored would soon change movies for good. He had learned to for years. To stay alive in silence, and now that silence spoke for him. When Silverado came out in 1985, Kevin Costner's name was no longer just a footnote. It stuck around. He was quick, attractive, and somehow very human. Being there didn't feel like acting. It was like the truth was being caught on film. After 2 years, in The Untouchables, he became the perfect American. A man with quiet bravery and strong morals who stood tall in the midst of chaos. It made more than $100 million, but it gave Kevin something more valuable: respect. For the first time,